And I think the process for selecting those projects was obviously a very difficult one. You know, there are numerous projects that one can fund that are absolutely great projects with great organisations, and it's a difficult process to prioritise. But ultimately, what it came down to was two things. One of which I was aware of before we started the process, and the other which I learned during the process. The first was that we wanted to invest in organisations that we trusted, both institutionally in terms of their ability to execute and their track record, and then secondly, individually in terms of the people that we were dealing with. And, being able to look people in the eyes and say, this is what I'm trying to do, this is what you're trying to do, do we understand each other? Right, let's do that. So that was the first thing, really trust. And then the second thing was that we learned through the process that there were projects that voluntary organisations find it very difficult to fund institutionally, and that are particularly appropriate for individual donors and that kind of support. And those are projects which are high risk, which are at an early stage, which are perhaps a little bit more experimental. And so, for example, we ended up funding a project in Burkina Faso to develop a new kind of water pump, which really hadn't been proven in Africa up to that point, but was very interesting because it's made from locally sourced, locally sustainable material at about a tenth of the cost of normal water pumps of that kind. So it's an opportunity to develop a new product and ultimately scale it into a very broad market. And we also ended up funding a project which was directed at stigma and discrimination towards HIV in Ethiopia, which again was a very experimental kind of project, very difficult to define outcomes, and absolutely not funding an orphanage or those kinds of projects which are really tangible and easy to sort of get your hands around. So we took the decision that it was our responsibility as individuals rather than as institutions to fund those kind of projects and take those kind of risks, and that's something I'm very glad we did.